Introducing your host, Joey Packard.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Schmoop Talk. Today we're going to be discussing the plot, theme, characterization, and setting of Wuthering Heights. We even have 7 guest stars all the way from the 19th century Britain. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for our first guest, Heathcliff. Let's start off by you telling me what role you play in the story.
Well, I was first adopted in Liverpool by Mr. Earnshaw after I was orphaned for unknown reasons. He took me back to his estate, Wuthering Heights, where I met my new brother and sister, Hindley and Catherine. They first hated me because I was Mr. Earnshaw's favorite child, but I developed a close relationship with Catherine, especially after Mr. Earnshaw died. That was until the Lintons changed her into a proper lady who could never marry a poor orphan like me and began to fall for their son, Edward. Ever since Mr. Earnshaw died, Hindley has been treating me like a slave, so I left Wuthering Heights for 3 years and returned handsome and rich. Then I came back, married Edgar's sister Isabella, and exacted my vengeance on Hindley and won ownership of Wuthering Heights after he died. But Isabella could not stand living in the house, so she left while pregnant with my son Linton. Edgar later brought me my son back and I arranged for him and Catherine's daughter Kathy to marry. But he died and I lost all reason to live and soon died.
Fascinating. Why do you think Catherine didn't marry you?
Obviously, Catherine could not marry me because Hindley made me his slave, and she could not marry someone of a lower social class. The Lintons' insults also made me appear worse to Catherine, which hurt our relationship.
Wow. Great stuff. Your relationship is very important in the story, but why?
Wuthering Heights is a romantic book, and our relationship is the most complex and longest lasting of the relationships, so it clearly must be important.
Ladies and gentlemen, Heathcliff. Our next guest is Catherine. Let's start by you telling me what the role you play in the story.
Well, I'm the daughter of the Earnshaws, who are a pretty rich family who own the Wuthering Heights estate. I grew up with my brother Hindley and my stepbrother Heathcliff. Me and Heathcliff grew up very close, but I was attacked after spying on the Linton family by their dog. They kept me at their estate and trained me to be a proper lady, and I realized Heathcliff was too poor and low in social status for me to marry. I then fell for the Linton's son Edgar and had a daughter who was also named Catherine, but sadly I died during childbirth after being put into a frenzy over Heathcliff returning after disappearing for 3 years.
Very interesting. I've heard you state some time about the Thrushcross Grange and Wuthering Heights. Could you describe each house for me?
Well, Wuthering Heights sits at the top of the hill surrounded by wind-bent trees and thorny grass. The weather is always horrible, and it's never lit up by the light or of a nice warm fire. Thrushcross Grange, on the other hand, is the polar opposite of Wuthering Heights. It is 4 miles away from Wuthering Heights, down in a valley, where the weather isn't so harsh. It's comforting, calm, and welcoming. The windows and doors are open often to the outside, and it's well lit by sunlight and the fires at night.
Well, thanks for coming out, Catherine. Let's give it up for Catherine one more time. Our next guest for tonight is Edgar. Come on in, Edgar.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me, when did you first get involved in the story?
Well, I'm the son of the Lintons who took care of Catherine after she was bitten by a dog. My family taught her how to be a lady, and we soon began to fall in love with each other. I am a part of the landed gentry, so I was of a higher class and better able to provide Catherine with a good life than Heathcliff. We got married and everything was going swimmingly until Heathcliff returned and my silly sister fell in love with him. He also began spending a lot of time with my pregnant wife, and that was hurting her health. I then sent off Heathcliff and prevented him from seeing my wife or sister, but then my sister ran off with him. On top of it, he all, On top of it all, he visited her in secret, making her deathly ill, and she died shortly after childbirth.
That's awful. How did you respond to that situation after she died?
I fell into a deep despair and tried to raise my daughter Kathy in peace, but she ran off to Wuthering Heights after I left in search of my sister and nephew. I died soon after bringing my nephew back to that evil Heathcliff.
Well, thank you for coming to the studio and sharing your experience. Last but not least, put your hands together for Henley.
Thank you for having me, Joey, on your show.
It was my pleasure. So tell us, how was your life growing up?
Well, I grew up in Wuthering Heights, and everything was going great until my father adopted a boy named Heathcliff. Ever since then, he began favoring him over me, and I began to feel threatened.
That's quite unfortunate. What'd you do to solve this problem?
I started to call Heathcliff names in hopes to turn my father on him.
Did it work?
Sadly, no. It backfired, and our father grew to like him even more. I even got kicked out of the house and sent to college.
I'm sorry, that seems like a tough situation.
It all worked out for the best, because college is where I met my wife, Frances, and brought her home.
Oh, I'm happy it worked out for you.
However, she died shortly after giving birth to our son Hareton, and I could not handle her loss, so I turned to alcohol. I became a drunk and gambled my house away to Heathcliff, and constantly fought with him and my son. Heathcliff was so cruel, so I drank too much and died.
Man, that's intense. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Wow, that was very informative. I learned that revenge and hatred just leads to more anger and bitterness. The bitterness that almost everyone treated Heathcliff with grew inside of him and made him the most angry and vengeful of them all. Thank you for joining me in another episode of Schmoop Talk. See you next week.